Coming back to speak with us today is the LNP Senator for Queensland, Rinnick. Now, Senator Rinnick has been giving voice to Queenslanders and Australians and their families who have been impacted by vaccine injuries. Senator Rinnick is not an anti-vaxxer, as he has publicly declared. However, he also says it's critical for Australians to not only be able to voice their concerns about the vaccines, but also to have someone who will take their complaints seriously and not have their voices shut down. Now, just last week, we saw the Fair Work Commission overturn a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for all workers at BHP's Mount Arthur coal mine, with the Commission's President Lane Ross saying in the ruling that the company's vaccine mandate was not a lawful or reasonable direction. And today, we're going to speak with Senator Rinnick about what he thinks needs to happen. Morning, Senator, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good.
Now, with this overturning of the BHP's workplace vaccine mandate, will this be the beginning of the end for workplace mandates, do you think?
I'm not so sure. I think that the judiciary there just ruled that there had to be, more conditions in place before the BHP could impose those mandates. So I suspect BHP will comply with whatever the court orders were. And then, I think they'll still be able to impose the mandates. I think the best way to end workplace mandates is for the government to legislate that no employer or employee, with the exception of a few industries, namely hospitals and aged care centres, can be responsible for the transmission of an airborne virus. I'm very concerned at the precedent that's been set here by governments and employers, where they are now trying to make out that somehow these steps are going to somehow stop the transmission of an airborne virus. Because, where is this going to end? Are we going to move into, are we going to do this for the common cold going forward? I mean, you've got to remember that once a law's in, it's always very hard to appeal. So I think what we really need to do is say, look, the transmission of an airborne virus is a public health issue. It's not a occupational workplace health and safety issue, obviously with the exception of hospitals and aged care centres, and that employers need to get on and employees need to get on with the job of running their business rather than trying to control something that's probably beyond what they can realistically be expected to do.
Now, here in Victoria, we've just seen also Ambulance Victoria had 25 staff stood down. They're now challenging their mandate, and far from being anti-vaxxers, I think the solicitor said you could not have a more medically informed group of people that wanted to go against this mandate. Queensland's about to hit D-Day as well. Now, we've seen staff shortages, especially here with our Victorian ambulance services, staff and skill shortages across industry. How much impact do you think this will have?
I think it's going to have a huge impact. I haven't seen how many people are expected to lose their jobs here in Queensland. I know the Chamber of Commerce in WA did a survey and they estimated 40,000 people would be out of work in WA. Now, WA is about 2.5 million, got about 2.5 million people. So if you extrapolated that across the entire country of 25 million people, I'd expect about 400,000 people to be out of work, across Australia out of these mandates. And they're pretty much uniform across all the states in terms of, what the rules are and that. So I think it's going to have a significant impact, obviously, on the people who lose their jobs. It's going to have a significant impact on the people, on those industries themselves. So if we've got a shortage of ambulance drivers or, people working in hospitals and teachers, correctional services, we're going to have a large reduction in workforce labour in those essential services at a time, especially here in Queensland, where we've now opened the borders, where, you would expect an increase or potential increase in hospitalisations. And that's also on top, of course, the large number of vaccine injuries that we're seeing as well. So not a good time to be putting people off.
Now, here in Victoria, as of midnight, we've just come into the absurd situation where they've removed the vaccine mandate for shoppers in a retail setting, but left it in for the workers. So an unvaccinated person can go into the retail setting to shop, but the worker must be vaccinated to earn a living, to put food on the table, to provide for a family. Again, we seem to be having this two-tier system, which just is unworkable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only two-tiered, it actually lacks common sense. Ultimately, and this is what I'm saying before, the idea that you can control the transmission of an airborne virus, and that it's going to be in some places, but not in other places. I just think it doesn't make any sense. And if you want to extrapolate that further to what's happening up here in Queensland, where unvaccinated people are going to be shut out of clubs and pubs and a few other things tomorrow, it seems absurd that when there was a low vaccination rate, people could mingle. And now that we're actually up at levels where herd immunity could be achieved, we're not actually going to get on with it. I mean, and this is the thing. I think a lot of these rules are imposed by bureaucrats for the sake of, imposing rules and exerting their influence rather than, for the better good of society and for public health.
Mm. Now, I noticed on the government's website, their vaccine injury listing has now included coverage for doctors, limiting their liability should they refuse to give an exemption for it, so that the doctor can't be sued. The government is taking on that exemption. That doesn't bode well, does it?
Well, no. It's the doctors are being put in a very difficult position because you've got APRA basically threatening them with temporary suspension. They claim they don't, deregister people, which is true, but they're certainly doing a very good job of dobbing everyone in and interfering in the doctor-patient relationship. So a lot of doctors are feeling under the pressure from APRA to not issue an exemption or write adverse event reports, I might add. And yet, on the other hand, like as you say now, I suppose we've made that easier, the federal government, because we aren't holding, we've removed the liability for doctors in that extent. And I've seen a meme going around, and it's quite a good one, that says, effectively the pharmaceutical companies have been indemnified and the doctors have been indemnified, but the only people who haven't been indemnified are effectively the people taking the vaccine. And it seems beyond belief that we can come out and say the vaccines are safe and effective. But yet, and if they are, then I don't see why we need to indemnify doctors and pharmaceutical companies. Why can't we make them stand by their word? If they say it's safe and effective, why do they indemnity? It's beyond, it's really testing people's faith in the system when they see, inconsistent rules and special favours given to, foreign-owned companies, at the expense of Australian people.
Mm. Now, we've seen some incredibly moving pictures and reporting coming from the opening of some of the borders, the Queensland borders, and things like that. People have been separated by nothing more than bureaucracy. We've got 8 separate sets of rules in one country. Does the federal government need to step up here and either get all the heads in the room and knock their heads together until they come out with an agreement that they'll all stick to, or do they need to take control so that we have some surety going forward? Because I personally know of people who want to go to Queensland but are fearful that they may get stuck.
Yeah. Well, look, the government needs to, effectively, enforce the exit plan that was agreed to by the premiers 6 months ago, maybe 5 months ago, where they said that, once all the states reached 80%, they would open up the borders, with some exceptions, but, they were meant to be exceptions. But what we've seen so far is that, especially up here in Queensland, is that the Labor government is only too happy to, find an excuse to put someone back in quarantine. So, federally speaking, we need to be calling out the state premiers on making sure that they actually stick by the exit plan and open up at 80%.
All right, Senator Rinnick, thanks so much for your time, and have a great Christmas if we don't speak before.
Cheers. Thanks very much, guys.